My guest today is Corey Hutchison. Corey is a very experienced manager in software development, and he's been number 2 in a unicorn company in the US, number 2 employee, where he grew to senior VP of engineering. And now he's a VP of engineering in another unicorn, which is based in Poland. Corey is passionate about software development management, about agile, and about how to overcome chaos in running a startup from both technological and people point of view. So thank you very, very much, Corey, for joining us today and being my guest.
Oh, thanks for having me, Maciej. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm starting to, whenever I have a senior software development person, software development manager, I'm starting with my classic question. Do you agree with the sentence that most IT problems are solved outside IT?
I think that if you do solve the problems outside of IT, then IT will take care of itself. It's a machine that if you set things up correctly, if you've got the right people in the right place and they feel enabled to do the right things, then yes, IT will happen, right? Proper processes will happen, good code will happen, because smart people put in the right place will just do the right things. So I haven't thought of it that way, but yeah, most of the challenges around IT aren't IT challenges in the end, or can't necessarily be solved by technical knowledge. They're solved by recruiting the right people, attracting the right people, then identifying the right people, putting them in the right place, enabling them, letting smart people do smart things, don't get in their way. And then good things generally happen. You also have to have the vision, but that also is provided outside of IT, right? Engineers should just be building things that enable that product vision, but that vision has to come from the people that are talking to the customers out there, the product owners, the CTO, CEO, people that really have an idea of what needs to be built for the market. And then IT is supposed to execute that. So a good vision coupled with a properly put together IT department will produce good product. And yeah, no, I think that's a fair statement.
So out of that, what would you say is the biggest challenge for an IT executive, software development executive in a very fast growth company?
Yeah, there are a couple, and they appear at different stages. So the first really big challenge is prioritization. So reading in the I believe is the Agile Startup, that book, really great book. The writer who'd been part of a couple unicorns, a decade before I was, said that startups don't starve, they drown. There's infinite workload, there's infinite tasks, infinite number of things you can do, but the number of resources are completely scarce. You have a few people doing everything, and you need to be able to prioritize. You need to be able to prioritize by impact. You need to be able to prioritize by efficiency. Where can I spend our time? Where can I spend our very scarce resources in order to have the most impact? And that's a real challenge, right? People fall in love with an idea. This is what our company is. This is what our product does. This is how we help people. And they follow that path. And a lot of the time when you've only got 10 customers and the biggest customer you've ever spoken to, biggest candidate or prospect comes in and says, we'll sign up if you build this crazy feature. And this crazy feature is a one-off, right? No one else is going to want it. It just fits their model. And it would take half of your team, half of a year to build. You need to learn to say no to that. You need to learn to say no, because it doesn't push you. It doesn't align with the vision of where you want to be. And it's not going to help you acquire the 12th customer, the 20th customer, the 30th customer. And it's going to take you a lot of effort. It's going to prevent you from building the product that would attract those other customers because of all the effort it's going to take. Right? So you need to learn to say no. And startups that succeed figure this out, because if you don't figure it out, you don't get to be a startup that succeeds. It will filter you out. And I'd say another really big issue is transitioning from a startup to that fast growth is learning how to let go and learning how to move from people that everyone does everything, everyone knows every change that's happening, everyone's involved in everything, learning to trust people to go off, do their job, you're going to do yours, and then in the end, it's all going to work out. So I've learned that people that are really great at startups sometimes struggle with this transition because it's their baby and they learn to be very micromanaging, very involved in everything. But that doesn't scale. And if you want to scale, then you need to learn to put the right people in the right place and then enable them and then trust them. And if you fail to make that transition, you'll be a successful startup forever. You'll never grow because you can't. Your time is very finite. And once again, the problems that you're facing aren't.
Yeah, I think that this, lets me think that maybe we are all working in companies who work startup style, and the future of even large organization is to work in a permanent startup mode.
Startup is a mentality, right? Startup is a mentality. I've worked at bigger companies that had a very startup mentality, and I've worked at much smaller companies that had much less of one. So it really is a mindset more than people say like, well, what is a startup? I think a startup is a way of thinking about yourself and the way of organizing your work. So it's definitely a mindset and a lifestyle almost.
Yeah, but you worked in a typical corporate, like one of the big four consulting companies before you joined OneTrust, which grew from zero to what, 5 billion US in 6 years.
Yeah, and about
in the valuation.
Yeah, in about 4 to 5 years, it hit 5 billion in valuation. And that was a culture shock, right? Going from Ernst & Young to OneTrust. That was, and immediately, right? I left Ernst & Young to co-found OneTrust. So
yeah,
that
was a great story that, let's say, two people left on the first day you joined.
Yeah. So yeah, that was unexpected. So I'd finished my MBA, and I decided to go the path of management versus really deep engineering. So I'd got my MBA instead of my master's in technology. And I joined Ernst & Young straight out of business school. And the person, Kabir Barde, who was looking to build OneTrust, was looking for some business technology combination expertise to help him build out the company. He had an architect, he had a head of engineering already lined up, and we had our first meeting, and we left that first meeting, and within a week, for whatever reason, as happens in startups constantly, they weren't able to join or commit the way that was expected. And so the entire technology department, the core for OneTrust, was shaken up before the company even really started. So Kabir asked me if it would be possible to, help out a little bit, both recruiting engineers, and in the meantime, do some coding myself, do some light coding. Well, that light coding turned into, several hours a day, 7 days a week for a year. It turned out to be my main job, and never really transitioned into that business technology role that we had both envisioned. Once again, startups, everything's very agile, everything has to change. So I ended up being the head of engineering for a year and a half, completely unexpectedly.
Can you please describe to our audience, let's say, what OneTrust does? Most people in corporate environment know it, but the people outside it's not necessarily.
Yeah, sure. Well, OneTrust is interesting. It works in a space that not everyone knows, right? It's not a Google, it's not a, you know, a Facebook or anything like that with a big, you know, retail or, you know, public facing view, but what it does is very critical. So it's about, when it first started, it was about privacy management. So GDPR was on the horizon back in 2016. The law that had allowed European companies or American companies to share Europe data, personal information of Europeans, you know, personally identifiable information, birth dates, addresses, ages, things like that, was struck down by a European court. Probably heard about, you know, the right to be forgotten. This is along those lines, right? So the European court ordered that this law was going to be written by the European Parliament, that was going to add more guidelines, that was going to govern the way European data was covered by all companies everywhere. And that means stored, transmitted, you know, access to it, how it was archived, gotten rid of, deleted. So really a lot of rights around the people, you know, European citizens that Americans don't necessarily enjoy, or at least didn't at the time. American data is, you know, that's the product. That's how Google and Facebook came to be what they are, is the person is the product. And in Europe, they'd see it very differently, where the citizen has primacy over the company, where in the US, it could be viewed kind of differently. So the reason this is such a big deal is because the penalties for violating these rules are an incredible hammer. It's some of the highest potential penalties levied by any institution globally. And it was a real threat. And no one was ready for it. No one was treating people's privacy the right way. And no one was, you know, taking these things seriously. So Kabir saw this opportunity, saying, well, people don't know how to do this, and privacy organizations within companies are horribly underfunded, right? It's usually like one person with a few assistants trying to govern how all the thousands and thousands of engineers and marketing people and salespeople and recruiters and HR people throughout the entire company are acquiring personal data, storing personal data, transmitting, sharing, and then, you know, deleting. It's chaos. And no one knew what information they had, where they had it, who had access to it. And so it's just those really serious fines were a very serious threat for a lot of companies. You know, everyone knew that they weren't in compliance and was going to be in some trouble. So he decided to found OneTrust in order to help companies do that inventory, understand what they have, where they have it, what the laws are regarding it, and then slowly get from the knowledge phase to the execution phase of helping you safeguard it, helping you transmit your data, helping you store it in the right places. Cookie management is another part of GDPR. All those things that come up at, say, in Europe, you know, this is how we want to use your data. That's all GDPR as well. And so that's another area that OneTrust grew into. It's actually one of the most customer-facing portions of it. The next time that you have a pop-up that asks you to accept cookies, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll often see, more often than not, powered by OneTrust.
Right. So it must have been challenging for an engineer like you, you know, to get all this domain knowledge about privacy policies.
Yes, I actually was, I guess, one of the first people at OneTrust to get a CIPP and a CIPT. Those are, IAPP is the privacy, it's the governing body of privacy rules. They're basically the ones that certify people that saying that this person has passed these tests. They have the knowledge necessary to get these certifications on both privacy professional and privacy technologist. And so, yeah, Kabir made a big point about that. He wanted to make sure that we were the experts that companies wanted to bring in, that, you know, to be those trusted advisors, that we know this stuff inside and out. So even as a technologist, even our engineers, it was highly encouraged to actually understand the problems that we were trying to solve with technology.
Yeah, there is a great book. I cannot remind myself the author, but the title is from 0 to 1,000. It's a lady who was at Google quite at the beginning, and is an HR specialist on advising startups, let's say, on how to tackle the human growth.
Mm-hmm.
And she specified in the book a couple of stages, some from 1 to 50, from 50 to 200, and from 200 to 500, and then I think 500 to 1,000. I don't remember exactly how it was, but how did the One Trust roller coaster go? Let's say, can you also identify some stages, more or less about the scale of the team, but also, let's say, how it accompanied with challenges you had, and how you solved it all?
Sure. So there was the original working out of the basement phase where, we all still had our full-time jobs, and we'd work in the evenings, and then every Sunday morning we'd go to Kabir's basement and work for the mornings, so basically 4 or 5 hours, and get to know each other, work in person. And there were 4 engineers that we had recruited, and myself being one of them, and Kabir and a couple other people that were in and out at the time, that were helping out, but not formally part of the organization. And we built the pilot. We built the POC that Kabir would take and start demonstrating out to potential clients. And at first, it's not a viable product really so much as it's something to put in front of customers, right? Like a good agile startup is getting that feedback immediately, right? You don't want to spend a whole bunch of time building something, go to customers and say, that's interesting, but what I really need is this. So you go to them with the idea and say, we know you have this problem, and this is our possible solution. What do you think? And they say, well, that's pretty good if you tweak it. And so you do an earlier course correction, right? Very, very agile. The best time to change your mind is immediately. The best time to change your mind is a month ago.
Yesterday.
But yeah. And the second best time is right now.
It's like this with planting a tree, right? The best time was 30 years ago. The second one is now.
It's exactly right. So you need to be talking to your customers immediately, even before it's something that they can use. And you're using your customers basically as, a sounding board. And when they do that, you find, and they're not customers yet, right? You're treating them more like, prospects, but advisors. And a lot of people really got invested. They saw this as, hey, this is really cool. These guys are building this product to my specifications. So not only are you building something that is more likely to be something that would solve their problem in a way they like, but they've also got that psychological, tie to it of, this is partially mine. I've got ownership in it because I helped design it in a way. And so that's part of the way that we got some early customers. We were the only one in the market doing exactly what we were doing. There were a few players in the market, some older school, but no one as technically focused as we were. Most of them were very, the privacy industry is very
quiet.
So it's security has a lot of black hat, white hat, and people that do machine learning, like real hardcore developers. And privacy is mainly lawyers and regulators. So a lot of the people in the privacy industry have backgrounds in law, and there was far fewer people there with really compelling technical backgrounds. And Kabir's vision changed that. We applied technology in a way to privacy that hadn't really been done before. It was usually about, these are best practices, this is what you should do. And we came in and brought a technology that helped you do it, made it much easier and much more reliable, much faster. So we built that, or at least we started building that. And then we got a few customers, and immediately we started going to conferences and putting our name out there, becoming a big deal really fast. A lot of marketing.
How fast was it?
It was really kind of crazy. So there were times when I felt, kind of embarrassed. This is this is just you. It's just you and a few of your friends, and we go to this conference, and we've got our shirts, and we've got a big, beautiful display, and we have these plans for what we're going to build, and we're pitching people on what it is, what our vision is, and it really made us look. It really made us look like we were a big deal that I didn't feel like we had earned, like we hadn't quite accomplished yet, but immediately, I mean, within 6 months, we're attending conferences and really putting on, this impression that we were, not an enterprise, but a very, solid, very professional organization, and we were becoming that. But to a degree, it felt funny, and it felt kind of interesting, but right away. And I think that was part of Kabir's brilliance, was you don't want to give the impression that you're a startup. You want to, and I don't want to say fake it till you make it, because at no point were we deceptive or anything like that. But we did have intentions of being a big company from the very beginning. And so we started acting that way, portraying ourselves in that way from the very beginning. And I think it helped us attract customers that most startups would struggle with, or give that impression that most startups would struggle with giving, because we never really acted at these conferences like a small, David versus Goliath type things. We acted like we knew what we were doing, and then we did.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I also think that you spoke about this clients at the very beginning that they were actually advisors to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, let's say, there is tendency today that if you're starting up something, and I used it in my company, it didn't work, you create a perfect persona of a potential customer. So you see it, and you make in a team, you make a description, you make assumptions and assumptions and assumptions.
And who you're going to target, which ones you're going to go after now, which ones you're going to go after later, who's the higher value candidate. As a startup, scarce resources again. So what's going to get us off the ground? And I know we all want to go after, have IBM as a customer eventually, but it would kill us to attempt to attain them today.
Yeah, but it's the most important thing is just to get going, just to have the first few conversation, whereas or to see some pattern in the data of your customers when you're B2C. Actually, I think that, let's say, B2C is a bigger challenge, because I don't know what you think, because you have difficult to talk to somebody.
So B2C is a completely different challenge. I think it's easier to get customers for B2C, but it's harder to get that critical mass. The numbers game is so huge. So your hardware, your infrastructure needs to be very robust. With more users, you've got more people doing really weird edge case things. So your software needs to be really stable, really reliable. B2C is its own really crazy challenges and that's what Booksy is today. So it's the company that
your current company.
Yeah, my current employer, we do a lot of B2C, and even our B2B is very small companies, right? We work with hair salons, nail salons, things like that. So it's generally tiny little businesses, and they're not necessarily very technologically savvy. And so you get a lot of the same things. Like typical B2B is big, very knowledgeable customers that have a lot of needs. They really, they know a lot. They're very savvy, and they're very difficult. But our businesses we work with are much more like a consumer than they are like these enterprises. So it is very, very B2C.
Yeah, we'll come to Booksy later, because this is a very interesting comparison, working for a B2B unicorn versus working for a B2C unicorn. But staying with OneTrust just for a while, this, let's say, the one most challenging stage regarding hiring and managing people?
So you have that original startup phase where you don't have any money, but you've got a dream and a vision, and people see like this is the ground floor. And so that's a profile of person, right? A profile of engineer. That is someone that wants to do something cool. That is someone who wants to learn. That's someone that in the evenings works on their own side projects, right? Their own side hustles. And so you have to target those guys. And when you start getting customers and you start making money, you transition to where you have a little bit of money and you're no longer looking at just those guys. Those people are very rare, right? Those people that are ground floor. But once that ground floor has been attained and you've got those 10 people that are now ground floor, it's a slightly different profile on first floor. They're no longer founders. They, necessarily founders. They are now looking a little bit more for stability. They're still looking at a risk profile. They still, they still are willing to accept more risk than a typical person. They're applying to an Ernst & Young, but now you're looking at salary as a bigger portion of it. And how are you going to balance that with the very meager resources you have? And what are you doing about growth potential? Like, what's the career trajectory? Well, we have no idea. We don't even have departments.
And they are asking you about it, right? What's my career path?
Yeah. What is this going to look like? Where do you see OneTrust going? Where do you see your company going? What do you see my role being? And it's like, man, your role is going to be 14 different things this morning. And tomorrow is going to be 12 new things. And a month from now, I have no idea what our product's going to look like, right? So you've got to be looking for people that are looking to get on that ride, right? You got to be looking for people that are not complete risk takers, because you don't want cowboys writing in your code, but you've got to have, you want people that can see your vision and are willing to tolerate the risk that entails in order to come along for that ride. Someone that gets really excited, a little bit of a dreamer. And that was really hard. I've been with a couple of startups since that really struggled to attract those dreamers. Kabir did an amazing job. I don't know where he found everybody. I think he just had a million conversations to be able to find that profile of person, because they're very rare. And
I agree.
And it changes as you scale. There's less stock necessarily, less risk. And so now you're looking at more salary, but you're still balancing that against the resources you've got coming in. So it's a continuously evolving profile over time as the company grows. And we actually hit, you feel those stages, right? You get that original group of people, you're at 10 people and you sit there for a little while, and then you get a couple customers, and now we can hire some people and differentiate. And then it's a different profile of people you bring in that are slightly different from the first group. And then you get to like 20 and you sit there for a little while, and then you really feel it. It's almost tangible when you go through this transition, this change, this inflection point of when the company profile has changed, and the profile of the people you're recruiting has changed, and the people you're bringing in and attracting are changing. It's interesting. Everyone knows it's happening, even though you don't even necessarily talk about it.
3 best practices and 3 worst practices in growing a startup.
So the worst practices, best practices are teaching. We recruited, so a lot of these dreamers are people with not a lot of experience, people with high potential, people that are younger, don't have necessarily, families or a lot of costs, and want to come in and learn. And honestly, a startup is a great way to take off your career, whether or not it's your first, second, or third job, but you're really looking to take off and learn a lot. Startup's an amazing experience. Even if it doesn't work, you'll learn a ton. And so as the manager in a company that's growing like this, you have to invest your time in these people. They aren't necessarily that experienced yet. And so you need to find a way, with the few resources you have and the few people that you have, you're not going to get more people. You need to make them better. You can't just add people to it. You can't send them to conferences. The way they're going to learn is from you. You're going to teach them. You're going to build processes. You're going to show them the way things should be done. You're going to learn from them as well. But more or less, you need to ×2 all the people on your team yourself. One of the very first guys we brought on at OneTrust, the first hire I think that wasn't part of the core 4 was straight out of graduate school, first job. And I wore a hole in the floor between his desk and my desk with him asking me questions and walking back and forth. I spent 5 hours a day talking to him about the code, answering his questions. He asked a million questions, which it drove me nuts, but I did it. And within a year, he was a senior engineer. He'd gone from being a junior engineer to a senior engineer. And with another year after that, he was a technical lead. And within a year after that, he was an architect. I mean, his potential was being fulfilled. And I'd like to take a little bit of credit there. And OneTrust itself, and that we invested in him. We didn't say, you're a junior engineer, I'm a senior, I've got important things to work on. You just bang out this very simple code that doesn't have any impact, and I'm going to and leave me alone so I can do the important stuff. And we gave him challenges as challenging as he could handle it at any time, and his growth was incredible, and it paid off. But that is one of the best practices, and one of the worst practices is the opposite of that, right? It's giving people stuff they can do and won't mess up, and not giving them any more, because you know that it's going to suck your time, and thinking that your time is more important than their time. And I think that's something that can cripple the growth of a company, is not investing and growing the people in it.
Yeah, I do agree that many software development managers from the level of VP to CTO make this mistake. Let's say, you come here and you are to be independent, which means I won't give you any time of mine.
My time is too valuable. My time is valuable. I'm a VP. You're a junior engineer. Your time is not valuable. But he's only a junior engineer because no one's invested in him. And if you want to think about what an investment means, investment is you put some money in and over time you get more money out. Well, you could hire more people, but doubling the size of your team has its own costs, recruitment costs, management costs. It's really challenging. But if you can make someone twice as valuable and twice as productive as they already are, well, that's an incredible investment. And it really, really pays off. And that person is never going to leave, right? Unless there's just an incredible opportunity somewhere else. But if you invest in your people like that, they don't leave. And then you don't have to pay recruitment fees. And then you don't have to pay to replace people and train people up, because you have amazing people that appreciate what they've gotten there and where they've grown up, and they'll stay. But it takes time and it's hard. It takes a lot of discipline.
Yeah. I know company who has attrition, let's say 3 people within 7 years out of 50 or 60.
That's a place I would apply to work. If I were a junior mid-level engineer, I would stand in line waiting for one of those spots to open up.
Yeah, it's like, of course, there is a structural lack of engineers. So every engineer finds a job within 2 weeks, I guess, all over the world. Just that there are few good jobs.
There are. And it is because there's few good leadership. There's very little good engineering leadership out there, unfortunately.
So how would you compare, let's say, your experience in the US and the one that you have now in Poland, plus B2B to B2C? We're coming to that.
Oh boy. So I have one really great experience in the US and one really great experience in Europe to do that comparison. And it becomes a challenge, like very few data points, but comparing them and one was before the pandemic and one was after, right? So the world changed. I can't attribute where these changes came from, but I can tell you basically, what my experience has been. Now, for OneTrust, and I believe this is common in the US, is people that join a startup, it becomes their identity. There is nothing that they wouldn't do, and nothing that isn't expected of them to do in service of the company. You know, I work weekends, I work evenings. If I'm not doing something for the company, if anything needs to be done, I will do it. So your identity gets tied up with the company, and it becomes very difficult to take time off. It becomes very difficult to, you know, to say no to a request. You know, no one does that culturally, and I think it's a very American mentality, which is, you know, I've got a job and they pay me, therefore my obligations are infinite. Whereas in Europe so far, my experience has been people keep their individuality, they keep their identity. This is who I am. I work for this company, and this is a great company, and they take care of me. But I'm going to take my vacation. I have things that I want to do. I have things that I like doing, and I'm going to do those. Very few people work evenings, very few people work weekends, and none of it's expected. These are people that, you know, are high performers who have a task that needs doing. And sometimes they took Friday off, so they work Saturday or something like that, and a little bit of comp time. But the company supports that. It is what I found, is that's the expectation. The company doesn't expect people to give up who they are and what they like to do in order to help the company become successful. I think here the mentality is the company is going to become successful because we have different individual people that we support, and we give them time, we give them space, we let them be who they are. But when they're at work, they're incredibly effective because they've taken the time to unwind. The mental health is going to be in much, much better shape. After the pandemic, especially, it's a really big deal. But in Europe, I think a lot of the strength is in letting people be who they are and have interests outside of the company. And in the US, at least when I was there, it was a very different mentality. All hands on deck all the time.
Oh, it's good sometimes. Actually, there are pros and cons of both attitudes. My sister, who worked in the US, as I told you the other day, said that she didn't have this observation that, you know, Americans work all the time, and they, they, you know, live to work. She said something different, that people are concentrated at work much more. Whereas in Europe, it's more gossip, it's more politics, it's more, you know, talking at the coffee machine, and, you know, playing games, which we
have that. Yeah, I think that's cultural. I think that's cultural. Ernst & Young, I worked long hours, you know, obviously not a startup, the opposite of that. But it was a very relaxed work environment. You could go for lunches, you could talk to people, and your relationships with your coworkers is very important. The pressure to perform wasn't as intense as a startup. It was a very supportive environment. So there's definitely a lot more of the chatting, a lot more of the gossip, as you say. Now, in the startup environment is incredibly intense. So I think in different areas of the country might have different attitudes around it, and different companies, they have their own culture. Kabir Bardey is one of the most intense and focused human beings you will ever meet. You know, his success surprised no one that really knew him, because he's just driven, right? It's got an Elon Musk type mentality of, I'm going to will this company to success and drag it there with my bare hands. And I mean, I've never seen anyone work so hard in my life as Kabir. He deserves the success he's had. But the entire company took on that persona. And he didn't expect us to work as hard as he did because it would kill people. But when you see the leader working that hard, then it becomes kind of an expectation, an internalized expectation of, he was here till, you know, he's going to be here till midnight. If I leave before 8 p.m., that it feels ungrateful and lazy. In Europe, I think when 5 o'clock's rolling around, no one schedules evening meetings. No one calls you. No one hits up chats. At least, once again, in my limited experience, that time is a little more respected.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think it's also change of mentality with the current generations. I think you call them Z now. Also, why it's probably Z. We are both X's, let's say, late X's, but X's. And I remember that in my previous professional life, when I was a young lawyer, there was the same culture. So if the partners stay till 10, nobody leaves before 10. It was an unwritten rule. And one guy who was a great guy and one of my best employers, probably the best one, was so proud about staying till 4 in the morning and watching sun comes up from his office, and he was, let's say, but I think this is burning out, absolutely burning out, and I see how many people were lost. This lost.
Yeah. We don't have to do that anymore. It was just this mentality, but there were some great engineering companies. There's really like destination places, and everyone wanted to work there. So if you got in there, you had to do whatever you could to make it successful. But now I think we've learned that there are a lot of great opportunities out there, and you don't have to settle for someone that's going to treat you like livestock. You can go work for someone that's going to treat you better, and you may not make as much money, but I think the pandemic's also taught us the value of that money and the value of our time and the value of our mental health, the value of our family. So I think there's just been this great reevaluation of what we really want out of our lives and what we want out of our work and how our work fits into our life.
Yeah,
And
absolutely agree.
I've stayed up till 4, multiple times, dozens of times. And I will not consider a job where that is an expectation ever again.
Yeah, that's true. But let's say we talked the other day that the current generation is maybe very fussy from time to time.
That's good. They should be. I think that we should take more from them, in that we should have expectations about our jobs and how they treat us and what we should get out of it and how our jobs should contribute to our lives. I hope we don't have an influence on them where they think of their job as their life and the most important part of it. I've had this reevaluation myself because of the pandemic, and I love my work. I love my job. I love what I do, and I love to stop doing it in the evening and spend time with my family. And I've never spent so much time with my family as I have in the pandemic. And then since then, it's changed the way our relationship with each other. We just spend more time together, and I really like it, and I never want to go back to the way it was before. And you talk about dealing with Generation Z and the differences in culture between people our age, people a little bit younger than us, and people a lot younger than us, all in the work environment, right? I don't think there's an issue in that. If you understand individually what everyone's there at work to achieve, you've got like an older guy who's trying to make it till retirement. He's got 5 years to go. Like, you give that guy assignments that he's comfortable with. You don't give him anything crazy. Don't ask him to learn anything, wild, and let him run. That guy's an expert. But you get someone, who's looking to move into management, someone that's been a senior engineer for a while and is really good at what they do. And then you get this young guy that doesn't know much, came from college, but doesn't know or didn't come from college, maybe went to a coding boot camp, right? A lot of potential, really great attitude, but doesn't know much. Every one of these people is useful. Every one of these people is valuable. It's about understanding them. Instead of thinking, I've got these problems, I'm just going to plug people in and make them solve these problems. It's about understanding that these problems are different shapes, and so are the people that you want to plug into them. And putting someone in a position that is a little bigger than they are is ideal, because you challenge them.
That's a point.
Yes, and it challenges them, and they grow. and they learn. And now all of a sudden they're bigger and they can fit into more positions. They can do more. It's about growing those people and understanding what it is they want to get out of their career. You should have a growth plan for everyone on your team. They're all individuals, assuming that people want what you want out of their career, assuming that people want what they're supposed to want out of their career is a false path. You need to understand what everyone's looking for. Some people want to move into management. Some people want to become experts. Some people want to deal with people. Some people never want to talk to another person again. And trying to create growth plans with them. Okay, well, I want you to take these certifications. I want you to work on this kind of project. The next time it comes up, I know you don't have any experience with it, but it's going to give you that breadth of your knowledge and experience to help you take that next step that you want to take. And then within 6 months, these are the things I want you to have done. And you hold them to account for it. One-on-ones, I think, have become this horrible monster in IT. Everyone knows they're supposed to have one-on-ones, but what one-on-ones become is they serve the manager. What are you working on? Okay, that's not right. I want you to work on this other thing. Or you tell me what it is you're working on. I think of one-on-ones as being just an extension of the service that the manager is supposed to be doing for that person. This is your time. If you want to cancel, it's on you. I will never cancel this one-on-one because it is your time. It is not my meeting to cancel. And when you come into my one-on-one, I want to know how I can help you. What are you running into? What are you learning? What would you rather be doing than what you're doing now? And how do we get you there? So it's not about me getting an update, right? I do want to know what it is you're working on, but that's not the goal. The goal is getting that person what they need to grow into what they want to become and removing the obstacles that stand in between them and where they want to get. So it comes down to that servant leadership. Managers think I've worked hard, I've earned this, you work for me, instead of you're the one writing code, your time is important. How can I get the most out of you? How can I grow you? How can I make you more valuable? And what do I need to do in order to help you achieve that? So everyone's like that. All the people, every generation, you find what motivates them and you give that to them. You find the challenges they need and you put them in that position. So I don't have a problem with generations. I think every one of them should be treated in a similar fashion.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Though sometimes we both have kids, let's say, pretty much exactly same age, right?
Yeah.
Early teens, and sometimes I feel like how this world work in let's say in big picture, because they are so picky that they have to have everything customized. Mm-hmm. Even if I ask you, if I ask, let's say my daughter, let's say, what do you want for dinner? So she's saying, I don't know, this kind of pasta, but without this and without that.
Yeah, it's challenging, and you can't fire your kids for lack of performance, right? So as much as you'd like to, sometimes it's a different management style, but there are some commonalities. Your job as a parent is to prepare your kids for when you're not around, so that they make good decisions and they can perform on their own. They can adult, and it's a lot the same way with a junior developer. You want to invest in them so that they can actually work when you're not around and watching them. The methods are different, but it's a similar goal.
Yeah. So do we need management at all in modern software development? Because maybe agile makes it all. So we don't need any.
A great question. It is a great question, and I've been thinking about that. And I think the ideal, the platonic ideal of a company is, yes, it's basically like a commune where all the different teams understand what it is they're supposed to be doing and can do it, right? Agile Scrum teams that are black boxes. No one gives them, they create their own rules, they form themselves, and you tell them what you need and they build it and it goes out. Now, I think that is something we can asymptotically approach, but I don't know within the real world if it's ever completely achievable, just because there has to be that central node that is governing everything, or else everyone's going to move off in their own direction. Who's creating the strategy? Now, because a product owner for this one product, this one component, knows that customers want this and this is how they want it. And even in an ideal state, they're working with the UX designer. It's absolutely gorgeous and they build it. But who is ensuring that what they're building and what these other two teams are building are complementary, right? How are they enhancing each other and not conflicting? What is our global strategy? And how are we optimizing for that? So you see this with engineers where everyone optimizes locally. And if you think an engineer wants to build code as quickly as possible, that's useless. Code is useless until it is in production and working. So if you write code and throw it over to the QA team and the QA team takes forever to test it and they send it back to you 5 times because of bugs, and you put it out in production and then customers find bugs, well, then I don't care how quickly you were able to write that code, right? But that's the engineer's instinct. And a QA person, they want to optimize locally as well. They want to test it as quickly as possible. But testing thoroughly, taking more time and testing thoroughly is also valuable. And the DevOps team getting stuff out into production, but getting it out in production stably and without any downtime. So in the end, it is about optimizing globally, getting code from design to customers, working in a working state, in a state that they want to use as quickly as possible. That is what everyone should be working on. So engineers need to slow down, write unit tests, consider edge cases. QA also needs to slow down, write more thorough tests, and automate them. The DevOps team spend some time writing automation pipelines that tie the whole thing together and get it out into production without any downtime, right? So like A/B, so blue-green setups, canary testing, things like that. And I see each Scrum team would do the same thing. They'd optimize locally. They'd say, this is how I'm going to make my product the best it could possibly be. But sometimes your product shouldn't be the best it could possibly be. Sometimes in order to best serve the customer or the product overall, there need to be some small compromises for a couple of these teams that they wouldn't necessarily do on their own, but when put together, creates a much better whole. And that's what engineering management is supposed to do. You're supposed to figure out how to get that pipeline as efficient as possible to get requirements into production quickly and efficiently. And leadership management overall in the company is supposed to figure out how all the different pieces fit together in a way that magnify and enhance each other instead of just being really great individual pieces. And I don't think you can do that without some sort of overarching high-level strategic view and management layer. I don't know. That's just, I'd love to be proven wrong because I love the idea. I just don't know where that vision would come from without that person whose job it is to look at the entire big picture.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Also, let's say, I think that the person who has this helicopter overview has to deal with volatility, which is in IT. New ideas come up, new solutions, new language, everything's changing. It's one big permanent change.
Yeah. And then prioritizing, right? There's, once again, a million things. Engineers, if you gave them their choice, they'd refactor code all the time. They'd fix it. Oh, they came up with this new platform. I'm going to rewrite the entire code base in this new platform because it's so cool. Well, is that an efficient use? How do we slowly evolve and work that new platform into the code without stopping everything, right? So there have to be some compromises there. Product manager would only build new features and forget about the refactoring and forget about the tech debt altogether. So there has to be balances, and you can't let individuals optimize locally when it compromises the overall global fit.
If we speak about global things, we're slightly running out of time, but probably one last topic that I would like to touch with you is you have experience in working with a team dispersed into many locations, many time zones. Any best practices how to deal with that? Plus, what do you think, let's say, about the global map of tech talent? Because you're also quite into it.
So Working globally, I've been doing this since before startups. At Ernst and Young, my entire engineering team was in India, and that helped me. And then OneTrust again, we had a big Indian presence, which is challenging because this is far from Atlanta. India is as far from Atlanta as you can get any farther, and it would actually be closer again, right? So on the other side of the earth. So the practices that I developed that were really effective are keeping in mind that everyone else's time, your job is not to get stuff done as a leader. And that's one of the biggest challenges is I no longer write code. I no longer put stuff into production. My job is to make them more effective. So my time is best spent making them more effective. I would make sure before I went to bed, when I woke up every morning, the very first thing I did was to take that half hour that I had of a common window before they went to sleep and after I woke up to answer any possible questions that they had as of that moment, and to have my meetings with them. Right, this is my one opportunity to talk to you. So this is what I do, and then before I went to bed every night, I answered every question they had, and I tried to anticipate any questions they might have the following day. And I'd give them as explicit instructions as I could, right? Spending an extra hour of my time, making sure they didn't get blocked and lose 8 hours of theirs. That's what I tried to do, right? You try to make sure that they don't get blocked, that their 8 hours of time across 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, right? That's 80 hours of time. And if you allow them to get blocked because you forgot to set up permissions in GitHub or something like that, well, then you've saved yourself an hour and cost the company 80, right? And a whole day. So really trying to think about how you can best serve the people on your team and make them as effective as possible. That's probably the most valuable thing that I could think of, is being sensitive to that. Otherwise, from a cultural standpoint, it still comes back to what I was saying about generations. Understand your people, know what it is they want. Don't project your own desires and what you would want on them. Really understand them. And then making sure that you build an environment where they can be successful. As far as the tech talent, I mean, the United States and India's tech talent is insane. But I think it pretty much got tapped out a long time ago. Everyone found that out, and the prices for engineers, doubled yearly for quite a while. And I think they've gotten to the point. Yeah, just crazy, right? Good for them. Good for them. I think that is had an incredible impact on Indian engineers. I've worked with several of them, and they're now enjoying a level of life that quality of life is wonderful. Now that being said, you no longer get that arbitrage where you can go and get 3 Indian engineers for the cost of 1 American. It's no longer possible, and we're seeing that in other places as well. Eastern Europe, the prices of engineers here, Google's opened up, Ernst and Young, Microsoft, everyone is opening up offices in Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, because
if I may interrupt, what would be your take now? What's the difference between a Polish salary of a senior engineer and a senior engineer in an expensive location like New York or Bay Area?
Oh, okay. New York or the Bay Area? First of all, the cost of living is about 5 times higher, right?
5 times.
So yeah, at least 5 times higher. It's bananas. Living in California is just crazy. But I'd say about a third for a really, really good senior engineer. You would pay about a third as much in Poland as you would for one in California or New York.
So it's much better purchasing power here.
It is actually. Yeah, no, living in Wrocław, where I live now, it's actually an incredibly affordable place. I don't make nearly as much as I did when I was in the States, but my cost of living is a fraction of that. So it's actually a very comfortable lifestyle here. And I think companies have found that they can They can hire engineers, and the wages are still very competitive. You don't have to pay as much because people aren't going to lose their apartments. It's very affordable, and the tech talent is incredibly high. In some ways, comparable to most American markets.
Yeah, great to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Corey, we could talk on and on. Unfortunately, I think that we are running out of time.
That's okay.
So thank you so much for this episode. It was as always a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope that our audience really enjoyed it because you picked up some fantastic points.
Thanks, Maciej. It was great. I appreciate the opportunity to reach out to people about some of these topics.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Maciej. Bye.